Through the daylight hours, fragrant flowers bloom in the olive orchard, emitting sweet perfume. But on this night of malice, kneeling mid the stones, Jesus prays with passion in agony alone. Peaceful walls of roses blossom 'neath the sun, while near the stony staircase climbing grapevines run. But in the darkest hours, upon this night of hate, pleading with his Father, the Lord awaits his fate. Alone he prays, alone he prays. Upon this night of hate, the Lord awaits his fate. Alone. Stream and hedge and olive are thriving there by day, calling to the weary to come and rest and pray. But underneath the clouds no moonlight finds the sky, as on this night of treason the Lord prepares to die. Alone he prays, alone he prays. Upon this night of hate, the Lord awaits his fate. Alone he prays, alone he prays. Upon this night of hate, the Lord awaits his fate. Alone.
The Passion according to Mark. The soldiers led Jesus into the courtyard of the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole cohort. They clothed him in a purple cloak, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him, and they began saluting him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They struck his head with a reed, and they spat on him, and they knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak, and they put his own clothes back on him, and they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. It was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Then they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him, divided his clothing among them, casting lots to decide what each should take. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. And the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And they crucified him with 2 bandits, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "Ah, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, let him save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. When it was noon, Darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, Listen, he's calling for Elijah. And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to Jesus to drink, saying, Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down. And then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Now when the centurion who stood facing him saw that this way he breathed his last, he said, Truly, this man was God's son. The Gospel of the Lord. Is this the way it's supposed to be? How many times have you thought that in your life? How many times have you thought that or said that just in the last few weeks? Is this the way it's supposed to be? We look upon situations in our life that cause our heart to break, that bring tears to our eyes, that make us angry or frustrated, and we often ask that question. And while that question is not often really directed at anyone in particular, my guess is that we often really mean to ask it of God. And as he is hanging on a cross and is about to die, Jesus finds an even more direct way of asking that question by saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? Our world contains a lot of grief right now. There are many things that we have lost, many things that have changed in a way that we don't like. But as good Christian people, we still feel a little uneasy about Jesus asking that question. We expect Jesus to be constantly aware of God's presence in the world. Sure, we may think that God is taking a day off from time to time, or we may find that God is totally ignoring us and the things in our world. We may at times even ask God, what the heck are you up to? But if Jesus feels that way, well, what does that say about our chances of, making it through these difficult times with the trust in God? Now, not all the gospel accounts of the death of Jesus include this phrase as the last words of Jesus. John is much easier to swallow as Jesus confidently states, "It is finished." He sounds kind of like a superhero. But Mark's Jesus is quite human. In Mark, Jesus is much like you and I, and he is very vulnerable. Mark has portrayed Jesus during Holy Week as being on a journey, a path of increasing loneliness and humiliation. We've all had days like that, weeks, months, even years like that, when things just keep getting worse. And that's how things are going for Jesus. He cannot catch a break. More and more people betray him, deny him, desert him, until finally he even feels deserted by God. Is that the way it's supposed to be? Recently read an article written by Bill Gottler, who serves as assistant dean at Yale Divinity, and he's also a pastor in New Haven, Connecticut. And Gottler tells a story that I've been thinking about this week. He writes, I saw Danny this week. He was walking down Church Street in downtown New Haven, pretending that he had somewhere to go, but I knew better. Luckily, I saw him in time and I could slow my pace so that he didn't catch my eye. I didn't want to hear from him again. Not yet. Danny appeared on our porch one cold December afternoon a couple years ago, hat in hand. He was honest, at least. He'd been sleeping here and there since getting back to town, he said, mostly on the porch of the Red Cross headquarters across from the church. The people there didn't seem to mind, and he always cleared out before anyone arrived for work in the morning. He didn't want anyone to be scared. He needed some food, maybe some money from the bus. We just hung up our Christmas star on the front porch, and we'd placed our Advent candles in our windows. It was a pretty tough moment to refuse someone help, so Against my better judgment, I dug into my wallet and I found a few dollars for him. As he was leaving, Danny turned and he looked me in the eye. And he asked, "Is this the way it's supposed to be?" He was off before I could even register what he had said. He came back with one need or another throughout the winter and over the years that followed, and sometimes I'd give him some money or make a call to help him find a place to live, but nothing ever seemed to work out for very long. I'd see him working downtown, selling newspapers in front of the bagel place or washing windows. "Good morning, Reverend," he'd call out. His greeting would almost always be followed by that same one-line sermon. "Reverend, is this the way it's supposed to be?" I'd nod as if Danny were just doing the right thing, working for a couple of dollars that were not just a handout, but he was asking much more than that, whether he knew it or not. In fact, the question still haunts me. Is creation in perfect order? Is society supposed to abide some people living on the margins? Is it okay that some are so poor that they must beg while others walk briskly off to their shining offices? Those were questions I did not want to engage. I don't like Danny. I don't like the kind of relationship we have built as it is on his need and my reluctant response. I don't like appearing at my door at a coffee shop at times when I don't expect and then see him. I don't like the one-line sermon that he insists on delivering me again and again. Danny, who I expect to see on my front porch any day now, probably knocks on a lot of doors and engages in a lot of conversations with strangers. I wonder if he reserves his theological challenge, "Is this the way things are supposed to be?" for me, the Reverend, and for others that he knows to be church people. Is everything all right in your world? Is everything all right in the lives of others around you? The story strikes me for many reasons, but none more than the author's honest phrase, "I don't like Danny." Because I most certainly am trying to push aside my own feelings of discomfort, vulnerability, and grief right now. I don't even want to think of all the injustices that exist in our world. I don't have time for that. The reality of how some are forced to live in such poverty that, and while we live in such wealth, right now I'm just going to justify my ignoring that because of a virus. But deep down, I really know that's just the latest excuse I have. I try to hide from all the things that cause me to be aware of the difficult realities in the world that you and I live in. And yet today, Good Friday, God meets us in these feelings of grief and perhaps asks all of us to spend more time in those uncomfortable places in our world. After all, this is how God is revealed to the world on Good Friday, through the disturbing and the uncomfortable, through the painful, through the cross. As we are separated from what we have come to know and love as normal, are we able to be honest with ourselves about our grief? Are we able to call out to God and ask, "Is this the way it's supposed to be?" Tonight, Jesus reminds us that questions like this are deeply faithful. They are part of human life. They are at the very heart of what it means to be a child of God. For Good Friday is ultimately a story of loss. This is utter devastation. There is nothing heroic about the manner in which Jesus died. It was painful and agonizing, but also humiliating as so many gathered in a crowd to mock him. We even hear in other accounts that Pilate is surprised that Jesus dies so fast. He was not a superhero on the cross. There's nothing on the cross that seemed praiseworthy to those who stood by. And even the disciples ran away because it appeared that Jesus had failed. He's dead. How could he be the Messiah? Yet somewhere, in this vulnerable moment of pain and loss, Jesus asks, is this the way it's supposed to be? And God proves that there is more in store for all of us than defeat, destruction, and death. Because after all, this is not the way it's supposed to be. Maybe the centurion knew that. Maybe the centurion knows what you and I should know tonight, that God has more in store for us. Amen.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh,